we're the 4th of April 2023, and as I start recording this video, I intend to talk about the second part of my series of videos, I guess, about home economics. And I have recorded the first part yesterday evening, and I intend to spend the next few hours recording the second part. Maybe there will be 3 or 4 or 5 parts, I don't know yet. But I will first show all my documents and then briefly summarize very quickly what I talked about for more than 3 hours yesterday. And yeah, I also have a new method of communication. If you are not interested in hearing me talk about boring stuff, that's my Twitter or TikTok PR, the public relations. You just look at the shirt, and that's okay for the rest of the video. And if you really are for a long video, that's the other message that I intend to talk about. Do we see? Yeah. So now I will switch the table boards to show all my documents, and then I will talk an introduction, and then I will continue. So now I show the document. Oh, first a little bit of demagogy, which is actually, it's not demagogy, it's just my way of practicing minimalism. This is my washing machine, as you can see. That's a plastic bin. I put water. That's one of the very rare cases where I use hot water. I put my laundry and hot water in this. I put the clothes on this, and then I scratch, one might say. That's a soap, organic soap from Marseille, the southern city in France, and I wash my clothes. Yeah, so I do not use electricity, I do not have a washing machine, and my clothes are clean, and it doesn't use a lot of water. It's ecological, it's economic, it's traditionalist, it's minimalist, and it costs I think 20 euros, and it costs 5 euros. So for 30 euros you have a washing machine which can last a very long time. Yeah, so now the documents. I will not comment this document again because I have in the third video. These are songs which talk about home economics. That's a joke. Here, UPS. I will not. Maybe I will later, but I will not talk every time about this. Yeah, but yeah, I just. So let us make home economics great again, and I will show the documents. That's the boring introductory part, but I try to promote a new way of communicating, at least in some of my videos. I try to act, I would say, like a Keynesian. Well, if I try to act the way I would like public intellectuals to act, namely to share their entire worldview when they talk, so that one might be aware of what they know, how they envision the world. So it would simplify communication, the sharing of knowledge, and whether or not one agrees or disagrees with the person who speaks, at least we could know how he envisions the world. To disagree eventually, or to agree, or to draw inspiration, but at least we would know who knows what as briefly as possible. I could talk for hours about all my documents, but precisely I try not to. So here is the document about home economics that I intend to comment in this video. Yesterday I recorded a video about the first layer, one might say the first level, psychology, sleep, hygiene, the bathroom and toilets, food and diet, exercise and health. And in this video I intend to talk about the next level, the next 1 or 2 levels, depending on the time that it requires. So this document that I share for free, actually I share this document for freedom, it's just a way of representing, systematizing in a good way, all the categories which structure the development of the individual soul in its immediate environment, and the categories which structure the household. And the purpose of this document is to help to think more clearly, in a more orderly way, and the purpose is to put order, discipline, and a libertarian, minimalist, ecological discipline and order at most levels to live a simple and simpler lifestyle. And the simplicity of a minimalist ecological lifestyle, which is the path towards individual and collective freedom, in my view, precisely the simplicity of a lifestyle can only be obtained by the very complexity of the intellectual structure, which is supposed to order the lifestyle. So I'm not giving any set of rules to follow. I'm sharing the cognitive map that I have been using, which has helped me a lot. If it can help you, whoever you are, that's good. You are free, of course, to modify as you see fit. But if it can help you, maybe you perceive this completely differently, but that's how I envision my relationship with my immediate environment. And the logical progression, one might say, is from the most intimate, the most natural, one might say, basic needs, necessities of life, and the progression, which is a psychological development, an individual personal growth, leads towards the exteriorization towards society and the outer world, which is made through civic life and through work and through social interactions. And the belief which has motivated unconsciously and then consciously this document and my view of ethics is that a society can only be healthy collectively if all the members or most of members of society are healthy individually, and individual health begins with psychology, health in the broadest sense, and then discipline and personal growth and personal development. That's the idea behind this document, which I intend to comment. And here I will just share briefly books just about the first layer that I have been already sharing yesterday, but I will not comment rigorously. I will just share the books very briefly. So, yeah, we live in an age, a technological age, where through the medium of the internet, the totality of world knowledge is made available for those who have an internet connection. Lectures, videos, podcasts, texts are accessible in real time. For those who have the financial means, you can buy books or buy conferences or books or DVDs or etc. or content which is for sale. But what is lacking is a structure, and here the reason why I've been working on all my documents actually is to put order and a map, a structure in an informational environment, the flow of information of an infinite complexity, and to try to simplify by the use of categories. It enables to put structure. I need order on a personal level to stabilize myself and to think more clearly and to be more balanced. And here I just share books. It doesn't mean that I advise you to buy these books or to read these books is just to illustrate the flow of information and the availability made possible by the very structure of the internet of the totality of world knowledge. And here I will share books that I have already shared yesterday, but just to illustrate. So, about the question of food and diet. These are some books that I've bought recently. I haven't had the time to read any of them, almost, but it's just to illustrate that we live in an age where all the problems of humankind eventually are made manifest, but all the solutions as well. So here I will list some of the problems in the topic simply of, what do we see? Food and diet. That's an illustration. UPS, it's a book produced in the United States of America. That's a singular country, which talks mostly about the problem of the processed food industry in the US, but the particularity of the United States of America is that it's a Western country. There are other particularities. It's a Northern American country. It's a majoritarily white, majoritarily Protestant country. There are many other particularities, but here the most relevant in the case of the food industry is it's a Western country, and all Western countries, which means here developed, wealthy, economically wealthy countries, they all suffer from the problems of processed food. So it can be logically deduced that all other Western countries suffer from the same problems. Here, this book happens to be written in English because the US is a country which favors and encourages study, intellectual work, freedom of speech, of debate, inquiry, and an endless quest to solve social problems, which is good. It can bring about negative consequences because sometimes there are good intentions, but it brings negative consequences. But most of the time, a lot of solutions to the problems which are created by well, maybe an excess of good things. The solutions are to be found, and the problem of fast food, junk food, etc., and the correlated obesity and health problems that it brings forth, it's predominant in Western countries, but it affects even non-Western countries which have relatively high standards of living, like the rising obesity in China, and it affects other parts of the world, Mexico as well, etc. So here's another book. Here, that's a French book about junk food, the problem of sugar. Yeah. This is not a book about the Third Reich. Yeah. Yeah, so that was that's the illustration of the problems in the diet category. But here, what can also be found on the internet yeah, we make a little bit of PR. Once I have successfully communicated my thoughts, I will give away these t-shirts. Not all of them, but most of them. I will give them away because. Yeah. So here I've listed. There are countless other books in many other languages. These are just illustrations, but here are some of the answers. That's dialectical. The problem brings about its own solution. Vegetarian. diet. I'm not saying that you have to adopt a vegetarian diet, but if people ate less fat, junk food, fast food, etc., they would be healthier, etc. Another book. The same. These books, I will not read all of them, but I will probably give them away. But it's just to illustrate. Yeah. Or how to eat organic without spending more. The healthiest, the best way to eat or to organize your diet. Become buy the local, basically that's the idea. Another book about the solution brought to the problems of the health industry, and here about seeds to grow to encourage a healthier lifestyle. So I've listed the problems, the solutions. Now in the realm of still food and diet, one might say, the problems of the meat industry, which is here, it's partly diet, but it's also kind of political because it's also ethical about the topic of animal liberation. This is a book by a Hindu philosopher, a female Hindu philosopher, about the situation of animals. Not only, but yeah. Now about the topic of health. Health, that's here. We see. Health, yeah. Other examples, the knowledge becomes accessible. What I'm just doing when I show these kind of books is just to show the system, it's just to contribute to the systematization of knowledge. Yeah. I do not talk about one singular or one specific topics. I try to show the view of all the topics. So here's a problem about American healthcare. The excesses of addiction to antidepressants. Another example, the problem of the French healthcare system for the retired and the old people, another example. And here, again, UPS, France is a singular country with a specific welfare system for retirement pension and for old people, but actually for all countries which have a socialized healthcare system and a socialized retirement pension, the problems are the same. They are different. There are problems in Japan as well. Of course, it's very different because depending on the level of economic structure of the healthcare system, but in countries where there is a significant proportion of the population which is really old or aging, the rise of the cost for medicine and healthcare, the cost for medicine and healthcare, they rise significantly because the more people get old, the more they get sick, and the more costly it becomes to cure them. So it becomes a problem for the whole of society to finance the life of older people. That's an economic problem, a moral problem, a political problem, a social problem, etc., etc. It happens in most countries, most Western undeveloped countries with a socialized system because of the proportion between people who are retired and who live off welfare distribution, which is the result of their financing partly through work that they have produced, but they receive money indirectly by state redistribution in the case of socialized healthcare system, and there are too many people on pension, on state-funded or state-financed pension in relation to the number of workers. That's the financial and political problem to which Germany tried to find a solution by bringing in 1 million Syrian migrants. It explains modern politics and geopolitics partly. And here, a denunciation of the problems of the healthcare system by an ecological Jewish thinker. Yeah. And now about health, different kind of books. So here that was about the healthcare system, and here it's really about health on a singular level for situations of emergency where there is no doctor. A do-it-yourself remedy. So people, even if they are not specialists or do not have the opportunity to become doctors, of course, it's not for everyone, but any person who is responsible, intelligent, think about problems, they can buy these books or these kind of books. Here it's about how to sleep better. Or these simple books, it's really basic, it costs €6. Rescue, first help rescue. Every person should have these kind of books and be familiar with the first techniques for helping others, because if everyone was more responsible individually, the burden which is the burden onto society would be lighter if every person was more responsible on an individual level. And in traditional society that's the case, but in modern societies, because of the very structure of the welfare state, it encourages unconsciously or indirectly people to be less responsible. It's not their fault, but the consequence is collective irresponsibility, I might say, because everyone relies onto the other, which is kind of good because it enables the division of labor and social cooperation. But when it becomes excessive, people really become dependent in a negative sense. They do not become interdependent, they become dependent. Interdependence encourages cooperation and socialization and civilization. Dependence is destructive when it's excessive and irresponsible. Yeah. An ecological book, degrowth. Yeah. So that was the summary of what I talked about in the first part of the series on home economics. I summarized a 3-hour-long video in broadly 20 minutes. And now I will show other documents. The introductions of my rather structured video, they are quite long. I can understand that they might be boring for a lot of people, but if you take the time to study for yourself some of the intelligent ideas that I share, you will gain enormously in terms of intelligibility and clarity, maybe, and yeah. These documents, that's how I envision the process of spirit, of mind, the travel, the journey of ideas in the modern world. In the middle, we see the encyclopedic structure from sociobiology, demographics, anthropology, physiognomy, psychology, intelligence and language, social life, economics, politics, etc. And there are only two sides for each determination, because it's like the yin and yang. And what happens in the West, predominantly in the US, but actually in every Western country, is a switch, a shift from the idea that we find on the left side, one might say. It doesn't necessarily mean the political left, it's simply that it's a relativity. There has to be a left side and a right side. And what happens, this is my worldview, it's not perfectly accurate, but it's a shift towards the right, and this is what happens in the intellectual life of the West, and therefore in the political, economic and social life. Every day, every minute, people become aware of certain problems, whether they are on the left or on the right, and that's a process of growth of consciousness on a world scale. Eventually it happens predominantly in the West, But eventually, the ideas which are being developed, when they are scientific, when they are true, they apply to everyone. That's the way by which knowledge is being produced and a world consciousness emerges. Yeah. I share this document because it helps to bring clarity and clarity of thought and yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's the phenomenal appearance of spirit or mind. And here I make a wise remark. It's very, it's very easy. It's very tempting to judge others, to judge them negatively and to criticize them, because when people suffer, they blame others, because it's easier to blame others than to blame oneself. But philosophy, which is also the message of religion, consists in this kind of document, because it shows the very structure of reality and of the unfolding of ideas. Spinoza would say that the order and the connection of things is like the order and the connection of ideas. When you understand that people, there is relative room for freedom in a sense of ignorance of the determinism, but actually the structure is kind of, I wouldn't say set in stone, but set in marble maybe. When you understand that people are determined to think what they think and to act the way they do, that's the Spinozian view, it kind of decreases the negative feelings or emotions towards others, because it's not always easy, but when you understand that others are determined to act the way they do, you are less angry or resentful or frustrated, because you understand that it is not them as individuals, but ideas which act through them in a way. So it decreases the frustration. That's one way of appeasing the suffering, I might say, and to be more, to show more empathy towards others, but not a compassionate empathy, an intellectual empathy, because it's not a compassion of the heart, it's a compassion of the mind. In a way, you understand that the others are determined to act the way they do when they hurt you, in a way, or when you disagree with their ideas, but if you understand precisely that they are programmed or determined, it's a path towards more empathy, and yeah. Because in case it's not clear, I'm a philosopher, basically. And a philosopher is someone searching for wisdom. There's a boring German metaphysician who would say, no, it's not a search for wisdom, it's a search for knowledge. But actually, philosophy and religion, they are kind of identical, and yeah. So, now, here is my view of nature. I will not comment thoroughly, but simply, it's not even accurate, but this is my view. These are really the fundamental categories which help clarify what nature is, to think more or less rigorously. If there is an expert in physics or any of the biological life sciences who sees this, maybe he will completely disagree, or he would think this is kind of incoherent, but it's not completely incoherent. There's an underlying structure, but I must confess that I am not. I accept intellectual criticism on all my documents eventually, but this one maybe it's the weakest. because I haven't had the time to devote the same amount of time and research and energy and study. But I will improve as long as I can. But yeah, it's like all other documents. I share them, then people are free to correct them as they see fit. But simply the message of this document is nature, like society, like how home economic is a totality, and in order to be made intelligible, all the parts have to be thought of in unity in a way, and unity and multiplicity are one, although they are different nonetheless. And in order to think just from a formal standpoint, from a methodological standpoint, to think rigorously and to think seriously, everything has to be, not in all the specificity, all the details, or all the complexity, but every part has to be looked at through the lens of the whole, basically. Whether in the human sciences, the social sciences, or the natural sciences, yeah. That's the utility of a document like this. And here, this document, precisely, it's in the continuity of nature. This is a transition, what we see at the first level, the transition between the natural world, from which, from a logical standpoint, from I say humans emerge as sociobiological, anthropological creatures, and the singularization, the development, one might say, of natural man towards spiritual man in a way, but spiritual here in the sense of thought and language, thought, and eventually the realm of morality, laws, and legislation, that which we call society. And in order, this document really, it's not that I am proud because I have borrowed a lot of ideas, but it's really useful because it enables to think about human society in a coherent, structured way. And here the message really simply is that every event, every social event, can only be understood within the context of the totality. Yeah. The problems which are found at one level, they are being reflected at all other levels eventually. And philosophy is the conceptual grasping of the totality. Yeah. So, what I intend to talk about in this video, and the next videos about home economics, precisely is home economics. That's the transition between man as a soul and man as, one might say, as a mind, or as a spiritual agent of a social community, one might say. To put order in the individual psyche, that would be here evolutionary psychology and psychology in a more refined way, to put order within one's psyche, which then means also to order language, to think more thoroughly and more intelligently, to act practically, in a sense of to try to do good in a way. So psychology, language, intelligence, will, and to order, to organize, to structure the whole of society eventually, and it begins on an individual level. That's what I have come to believe, one might say, and this is what I intend to talk about in this video and the next videos about home economics. Yeah. home economics, I show the view of the totality once again. So I have briefly talked about the first layer, and now I intend to talk more about the second and eventually third layer, maybe depending on the time that it requires. So clean your room, furniture and minimalism, clothes and laundry, kitchen and crockery, the garden, prepping, and maybe more depending on the time and the length and the duration of the video. But so here that's the end of the introduction after 35 minutes. But now I will drink a glass of water. And I will briefly, here I will talk for a few minutes or maybe a couple of dozens of minutes about, I will not talk about randomly, but I will talk about, talk about ideas in the ordinary sense that I have had on my mind since yesterday. I will talk about ethics briefly. This has inspired a lot of my life, and yesterday I received this book that I briefly started to read today, and that's the great jihad, or to struggle against oneself. So yeah, I will briefly talk about ethics and religion. I intended to talk about this yesterday, but I talked about something else for my turn. I will talk about this now. Ethics. It's here. Let us simplify. Another word could be. Yeah, that's also the struggle against oneself. One might say. Ethics or morality consists in guiding one's life, ordering one's life according to a certain set of principles, and to struggle against oneself, to refine and polish the rough aspects which prevents peaceful or harmonious life with others. Every human being has negative tendencies. Here negative means negative for others, but for the self as well, which prevents the most harmonious and most peaceful social life, one might say, living together. It's living well together, whoever the group is, because of the natural inclinations of man. And all religions, they encourage man to restrict his biological and natural tendencies, aggression and lust, to simplify. And lust, in the broadest sense, it can take the form of sexual desire, of course, but also greed, gluttony, laziness, excesses of pride, etc., etc., the classical sins of the Catholic Church denounces. Yeah. And let us here illustrate. Every code of ethics, whether religious or secular, is a singular code of ethics. It can be written like in the Torah or the Quran or the religious text of the various, the Hindu text, etc., it can be formally written, or it can be implicit. It can sometimes be translated into law, in the case of the secularization of ethics, one might say. So it can be formally acknowledged or not. It can be implicit. The customs of a people, they are in a way the invisible ties, the invisible, implicit, most of the time unconscious for the people itself, ways of behaving, the culture in a broader sense, the behaviors which cannot be properly identified by the people itself because they are implicit. That's why foreigners, the difference with foreigners, whether they are national foreigners or civilizational foreigners or racial foreigners or really the other, in terms of really a radical difference of culture, which is often related to ethnicity, not always but most of the time, it enables to become conscious of the self because there are unconscious biases which can be good but which can only become acknowledged, and one can only become aware of them by being confronted, not necessarily in a negative sense, but by being in reciprocal interaction with an other. The other enables the self-consciousness of the self, precisely the consciousness of the self, which is self-consciousness. Order is order only because it is not chaos. Chaos is chaos only because it is not order. That's the unity of opposites. Yeah. Yeah, so every set of ethics, every set of rules of morality is a singular case of a code of ethics, whether formal or informal, which is written or not written. And every singular set of ethics or morality belongs to a particular situation, one might say. And here the situation can be historical, the way that the ancient Greeks behaved, the ancient Romans, the Middle Age ethics, the bourgeois morality of the 19th century, the modern woke ideology, anti-racist, cosmopolitan, liberal, etc., the puritanical morality of 17th and 18th century England and America, etc. So every singular set of ethics belongs to a particular class, whether historical, whether geographical, ethnic, in a sense that every ethnic group, before the advent of the Abrahamic religions, predominantly, or the religions of the book, whether Bible, Torah, and Quran, or written religions like the Hindu religions and the written text, the Veda, the Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, etc., etc., before the advent of written religious texts, which has enabled to stabilize and to facilitate the transfer and the spread of religion, before this historical period, the religious rules, which were ethical rules as well, and even legal, law, morality, and ethics were not distinguished as they are today, where law is different from morality and religious belief is separated from morality and law in secular societies. Otherwise, these would be called theocracies. There are still theocracies. But the separation of the source of morality from either religion or customs of the people or an abstract set of laws, they are kind of intertwined in a way, but they're also distinguished. It's a modern phenomenon, but yeah, every singular code of law belongs to a particular class, whether divided by ethnicity in a case of what we call the primitive or the pre-modern societies, where precisely the abstraction of law had not yet entered the society. And here I will not take the example of the primitive or the native tribes of the American continent or of Africa, or of Australia with the age of exploration. But I will take the example of the Germans. The Germans, before the Roman conquest or the conquest of Charlemagne, they had no written law and codified set of legislation and ethics the way the Romans had, for instance, or the Christians, later the Christians, but they nonetheless were a very virtuous people because they practiced morality and ethics, but it was not written precisely because the groups were much smaller. So it was an ethnic ethics, and this was the case of all human groups. And entering world history means separation from the tribe and entering civic society, which is characterized by abstract relationship of interpersonal in interaction, in a way, in the tribe, which is the way of living of mankind before the advent of history, basically, whether the Greeks, the Romans in the case of Western civilization, and then Christians in the case of Europe, but then which expanded to the rest of the world, or Islam before the conquest of Islam, or the conquest of Buddhism, even peaceful or not peaceful. So before a society, a group of people enters world history, it is not lawless, simply that the laws are not written because the society is very knit together. There is not the abstraction of legislation or law or a codified and written in religious texts, because the religious customs, they are being practiced organically in a way on a small scale, and everyone is aware of them. The necessity to refer to a book, or in the case of religious morality, or to refer to ethics or law in the case of the civic code, or the table of laws, the 12 laws of Roman societies. I don't even call it the code of the 12 laws, or the code of Hammurabi in Mesopotamia, or the Justinian code in the Byzantine Empire, etc., etc., or later the Napoleonic code, etc., etc., or the Constitution of the US, or the Constitution of the French Republic, or the Magna Carta in England, etc., etc., or the Human Rights Declaration. Before this abstraction of law, which means more extension, because it's more universal, consciously universal, therefore it's more extended. Ethics, morality, and law were connected with the life of the tribe in a way. So the advent of history, often through the means of violence, separates the primordial unity of the tribe. That's entering the historical process. Every singular code of ethics is a singular, which belongs to a particular class, whether defined by ethnicity, geographical area, culture, civilization, whatever the particularity. But the universal is the same for all, and the universal, when it regards ethics, is a set of principles that all members of the group, whether it's the tribe, the nation, the empire, the religious community, the religious sect, the class, the social class, whatever, the whole of mankind, every member of the group has to obey a certain set of principles to restrict himself in order to enable peaceful interaction within the group. So that's why morality and ethics are negative, because they require self-restraint, limitation, renunciation, etc. But they are also positive, because this negativity is that which enables the harmonization of social interactions within the group. Yeah. And we live in an age of the spread of global information. We live in the global village, and all cultures are confronting one another either through migration or through the spread of ID, or militarily, or demographically, or economically. And what happens on a global scale is that people, they need stability and security in a world which is very confusing because there's an overflow of information, economic, cultural, intellectual. The world moves very fast. The flow of information is very fast, and the communication, transportation, it goes very fast, and people, they need stability, so they retreat towards what seems familiar and which can bring them stability. And there is a tension, one might say, between the retreat into the particular and the promotion of a universal set of ethics or a universal legislation, because legislation, in a way, that's the crystallization of morality, in a way. When morality becomes a little bit ossified, it becomes law, which has its positive aspect and its negative aspect as well. It can be emancipatory, but it can also be alienating, because usually when a society has really an abstract set of laws, it means that the organic primordial unity of a group life within the tribe or within the community has been lost. That's the complaint of the Romantics against the abstractions of the Enlightenment. That's the complaint of the Germans against the abstractions of the French. Yeah, I simplify. That's the revolt of the traditionalists against modernity. I simplify. Yeah, so we live in an age of the emergence of a global consciousness, and ethics, in order to be ethical, has to be universal, namely it has to be applied for all. But here, that's basic philosophy. The universal does not exist independently of all its particularization, and not all humans can be or should be expected to practice the same ethical code, because they are different in their particularities and in their singularities. But the fundamental principles, fundamental is another word for universal, one might say, in the case of UPS, they have to be the same, because all humans are rational, and they can all act according to principles, what animals can't. Animals act strictly according to instinct. Humans can think about their instincts, and they can transcend, and they can act rationally, namely universally, to try to transcend their instinct to favor cooperation and harmonization of conflicting interests, and that's the ethics of libertarians. Libertarianism is here I will pick up the book by Mr. Stephen Molyneux. I haven't read these books like most of the books that I promote, but Stephen Molyneux is a proponent of what he calls universally preferable behavior. UPB, I'm a proponent of UPS, but actually they are connected. The libertarians, whether, here I'm not talking about individuals, I'm not talking about Ron Paul or Stephen Molyneux, but the libertarians, they are the proponent of a universal ethics, which is based on the non-aggression principle, and based on reason, and on intellectual debate, and on respect of individual rights, which means property rights, and they are the most consistent ethically, because they respect the individuality of all, and it can be universalized. It can be universalized. It can logically, empirically, no, because it appeals predominantly to highly intelligent or highly intellectual people, but the principles, they can be universalized, but precisely the universal does not exist independently of its particularization, so it has to be adapted to every particular group and then every singular individual. But a code of ethics is moral, is ethical, is good if it can be universalized. Yeah. And what I have done, what I do and what I will do with my home economics, because I am a singular individual with particularities of age, ethnicity, culture, nationality, education, civilization, my singular case cannot be universalized as such. I have my own personal story with my own problems. My particularity can be universalized within the realm of the particular, namely, I already talked about this, I talk mostly, as of now at least, to Westerners, because Westerners in the modern day and age, they suffer from the same sort of problem, because we all share the particular in common, namely a civilization which has really become decadent, and it's not, it's our own fault in a way, and we are struggling against chaos to re-establish order. And it begins by ordering one's own soul, one's own mind, one's own room, like Peterson says, etc. That's what I'm trying to provide. So I speak more, as of now, to Westerners, but because the U is within the P and the P is within the S, potentially I talk to everyone, but I am not yet intelligent enough, smart enough, wise enough, mature enough to provide a universal code of ethics, but I have tried empirically, it means from bottom up, with the problems that I've been encountering and that I still encounter every day. I try to find solution. I try to draw inspiration where I can. I try to do what I can. So that's what I share. That's we are here, the 4th of April. I improve intellectually every day, morally. Not necessarily because I still make mistakes and I still have flaws, and this book is very intelligent. The knowledge of the wise person or the knowledgeable person, if it is not acted to bring about virtue, it can bring corruption. Of course, that's very difficult to be intelligent, knowledgeable, smart, wise, virtuous, interesting, entertaining. It's very difficult to be everything at the same time. I have my ups and downs, but what I can say, not to defend myself, but to help others, is that if the ideas that are shared are good, that's good. If they are not good, do not imitate them and do something else. That's how I try to find appeasement. Either I produce good ideas and that's good, or I produce bad contents, and then it's kind of bad, of course, but it's good nonetheless, because it enables others to forge their own view of the good as opposed to the bad that I intentionally or unintentionally, consciously or unconsciously produce when I do. So that was what I intend to talk about. So here, I just, because I thought, before even reading this book or recording this video, I was already thinking about about precisely the question of Islam. Radical Islam. The code, it goes for the Jews as well, the Orthodox Jews, but let us talk about the Muslims. The moral laws or code which are found in the Quran, they are a singular set of laws for a particular situation, namely the Arabic Peninsula and the Arab people of the 7th century. And in this sense, they are probably they are perfectly adapted to the specific case to which they try to bring about a solution to the problems that the nomadic Arabic tribes, the nomadic Arab tribes of the Arabic Peninsula in the 7th century that's a perfect good answer to the problem that they encounter, because it has had a tremendous success in space by expansion and in time. So in a sense, it's perfectly well adapted to the context in which historically it was born, of course. But to try to copy rigorously the singular aspect, the formal aspect, and to transpose to any other context, to transfer the singular aspect to all other particular cases, it's not that it's wrong, but it's kind of, it's rigorous here, kind of a negative sense. And here I'm not talking just about Islam. It's true for every code of ethics, namely every code of ethics, if it's good, of course, it's true to the extent that it contains the P and the U within each singular case. But to try to transfer rigorously a set of ethics, a singular case, to a completely different particular situation, I understand perfectly why it can be very successful, because it brings group cohesion, and young Muslims, here in the case of Western civilization or in the world at large, who are disenfranchised or who are kind of lost or who are kind of resentful because of colonization or because of economic problems or because of the social and political problems in their countries, whether these are Middle Eastern countries or Muslim groups in the West. Or it's true for the Jews as well. It's true for every people actually, but people who find themselves in difficult situation, they need stability and they try to cling to a rigid, rigorous is good, rigid, not good. Rigorous, here I will, when I say rigorous, actually it's kind of good, but if it's too rigorous, it can become rigid, and rigidity, usually it's not good. So they are in search of a rigorous code of ethics, like most human groups, developed, intelligent groups, they are in need, are in search of a rigorous way of behaving, whether they are religious or not, whether they believe in God or not. That's the case here of modern white leftists, the liberal ideology, the woke ideology. That's a religion, not in the classical sense, but actually it is, because it's simply a search for group belonging and to obey a certain set of ethical standards. That's the recreation of a religion. There are the principles to follow, the rewards and the punishment, the in-group and out-group, the heresy, the orthodoxy, purity, impurity, the scapegoat, etc., etc. Yeah. So the woke ideology, it's like the poor Muslim immigrant groups who are turning towards really radical Islam because they are in search of stability, or the Jewish communities who are really seriously rigid, the Orthodox Jewish communities, not those of Israel, but those, for instance, in other countries where they obey really a rigid set of rules because they need group cohesion, because they are a tiny minority in a society which can be hostile or difficult, so they need to cling to a rigorous set of rules, and this is a normal psychological response of every human, individually and collectively, when they are in a situation of difficult lack of guidance, and they feel lost and helpless. They need to cling to something stable and rigorous, which can turn to something rigid, to find stability. I understand, but here I speak philosophically. One might say it's good formally to follow a certain set of ethics and to act according to principle. It's good here. That's the logical categories of form and content. To obey a formal set of moralities, it's kind of good because it brings individual and collective discipline and rigor and discipline, so it's kind of good, but the content is important as well, namely a code of ethics is supposed, here that's an empirical, scientific, Anglo-Saxon perspective, it is supposed to answer the problems of a specific situation. And this is the reason why the home economics that I promote, of course, historically determined, one might say, because I talk a lot about ecology, because in the modern day it's not the primary problem, but it's a problem because humankind is becoming aware, an ecological consciousness is rising, etc. So in the 21st century, ecology has to be taken into account to adapt to the modern context in a way. And the reason why I've been doing home economics is simply because that's the particular case of Western civilization over the past 50 or 70 years. Individual behavior has been completely disrupted because, some might say, because of cultural Marxism. It's partly true, but actually it's because of an excess of wealth, which for here, that's a Marxist analysis, an excess of wealth has brought about dissolution of customs. It happened already in ancient Rome. After several decades of moral decadence, it's not an accusation against all the people, but all individuals within the people, but collectively Western civilization, Western countries have been declining morally since the 1960s because there has been a loosening of morality. The reason is because after the traumatic events of the two world wars, with the demographic rise, the rising standards after the Second World War, etc., etc., there was a willing desire to get rid of the constraints which had brought about so many traumatic events in the first part of the 20th century. So it can be, I can understand, but after 50 or 60 years of complete loosening on an individual and collective level, there is a need to return towards order and discipline, and that's the reason why a lot of people are in search of rigor and sometimes rigidity, and the disenfranchised people, if they are foreigners in Western society, they turn towards radical Islam. The more or less privileged economically, they turn towards the woke ideology. Some intelligent people, they turn towards a revival of Catholicism or Protestantism or paganism, and the drive is the same. It's a search for a structure. But yeah, what I intended to say yesterday already, that I've been thinking about briefly, simply that to blindly obey a set of ethics, it's not I mean, it's partly good because not blind, but to obey a set of ethics is good because it means that you are rational, you are disciplined, you are moral, but the formal aspect is important. So to obey a set of ethics, but to blindly follow a set of ethics, if it's completely disconnected from the context within which you find yourself, it's not a proof of intelligence, it's a proof of a willingness and will and dedication, but it's not really a proof of intelligence, because intelligence, here that's the Darwinian perspective, it's also the ability to adapt to a given environment. And I understand why the religious people those who do rigorously follow a certain code, but the ethics that I promote, here I speak to the intelligent people. I have tried unconsciously and then consciously to give an answer to the problem that I have been confronted with as a singular individual within the particular context in which I find myself. So I don't ask you, if you have taken the time to watch this and if you're interested in my videos about home economics, I don't ask you to follow all the pieces of advice. They are singular answers to a universal problem within the context of Western civilization, namely how to bring back order, discipline, responsibility, and eventually liberty. That's what I am seeking to achieve, to live freely, and to live freely. Ron Paul is very intelligent. It doesn't mean to do whatever you want. That's not freedom. That's alienation in a way if it's excessive. Freedom can only be attained through individual and eventually individual discipline and collective order, and that's why anarchy, real anarchy, namely not a chaotic anarchy, but ordered anarchy, that's the absence of a ruler, namely the anarchy, libertarian anarchy, is the ideal that I've been unconsciously and then consciously more or less intensely and more or less consistently striving for, because an anarchist society in a sense of libertarianism is a society which would have achieved maturity and a level of self-development of most individuals which would enable them to live according to a matured and complete and perfect, I might say, behavior, because they wouldn't need an external authority to guide them and to threaten them with punishment in case of disobedience or etc. They would be able to rule themselves. There would still be I would say punishment and rewards for good and bad deeds, but it would come from the ability of the community to organize itself while respecting the dignity of every individual. That would be the reconciliation of the individual and the group, because the characteristic of most religions is the necessity to set boundaries between the group and the out-group. That's a tribal mentality, and it's necessary in the evolutionary and historical process, because group cohesion can only be built and reinforced by opposing another group and to distinguish, because if there is a set of morality who is Muslim or non-Muslim, Jewish or non-Jewish, Christian or non-Christian, anti-racist or not anti-racist, Puritan or not Puritan, etc., etc., or if nationalism is the religion, metaphorically, then that's the national citizen versus the foreigner, etc. There is in-group, out-group. This has been the recurring feature of human interactions in various modes. The group can be, again, tribal, religious, civic, national, cultural, ethnic, etc., etc. But eventually, the in-group, out-group has to be abolished for a world community to emerge, but it can only be made possible if the humans which composed the society, which has to be governed by rational ethical rules, if they are able to govern themselves. That would be the coming forth of the growth of man. And here I agree with some of the views of sometimes even radical Muslims, but I will not pretend that my mindset is religious in the classical sense, because my ideal is not, here I am honest, my ideal is not a society of men who live in constant fear of God. It's a society which has grown up and is able to regulate its behavior individually and collectively without living in constant terror of a supernatural entity. I'm not an atheist, but that's the ideal here of German idealism. And the libertarians, that's the cunning of reason. I don't know, and I don't care about their personal belief or disbelief. I don't care if the libertarians believe in God or not, but their ideal, paradoxically, even if all libertarians were atheists, they would still unconsciously promote the ideal of God in a way, because libertarianism is the ideal of a self-regulating and self-regulated society where conflicts would have been abolished, not because man would have become perfect, but because they would have found intelligent, rational way to deal with one another's negative tendencies in a peaceful, harmonized way. That's why I'm a libertarian, But yeah. But yeah. Yeah. That was my introduction about ethics. Because yeah, I will be honest with what I think. My German view of philosophy, which is actually a religion as well. God. Why would God want to be worshipped by humans who live in a constant terror of God? That's a good question. Wouldn't God want to be, I wouldn't say worship, but to see humans who are the creation of God, to see them grow up to the point where they don't need to downgrade themselves in order to praise God, like to create an infinite gap between the greatness of God Almighty and the worthlessness of humans. That the tendency that radical religious group, whether they are Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, or usually these are Jewish, Muslim, and Christian people who think that in order to praise God, they have to downgrade the world and humans, and that they can only praise the greatness of God in comparison with the worthlessness of humans. That's the Protestant view when it's a little bit excessive, but the Muslims and the Jews, they tend to think like this as well. But yeah, that's a rhetorical question. Why would God would like to be praised for having created the world and created humans if humans keep downgrading the world and themselves? I'm not saying so in this sense, because I kind of agree with a lot of what Khomeini say in this book, what I've read, but I nonetheless kind of disagree fundamentally, and here I cannot pretend, I cannot fake, because this is contrary to what I have believed for many years. I kind of fundamentally disagree with the radical views of Christians. No, not radical, the views of radical Christians, Jews, and Muslims who think that they can only praise God by criticizing and downgrading and despising and showing disdain for humans and for creation. I'm not saying that it's the case of all radical Muslims, radical Jews, and radical Christians, but there are some excesses that I myself have been victim of. Really, there are situations where I found it myself in agreement with really fanatical Puritan Christians. But if it's excessive, it's not. So it's not good. So it's good to encourage man to struggle against himself. For improvement, that's really good. And here I agree with the religious people of all sorts, those who encourage man to struggle against himself, to improve himself, of course, but yeah, the result of a struggle, if it's successful, eventually that would be the enabling of a libertarian society. And here it's not about economics or about making business, etc. That's just a byproduct. A truly libertarian society would be a society where the people, the humans, would have grown up and matured and successfully struggled long enough or hard enough to have achieved a state of collective life where most conflicts, or at least violent conflicts, could have been peacefully resolved to the greatest extent possible. And here, that's what I think. The Americans, that's how I envision this, the Americans of the 19th century, of course there's a problem of slavery and the oppression of Indians, but within the white society, this, in my view, with my historical knowledge as of now, this is the society where this ideal of a relatively peaceful cooperation based on liberty and responsibility and maturity, one might say, was achieved the most. Yeah. Because here, I will praise the Anglo-Saxons against Europe. The Anglo-Saxon societies, of course, there's the problem of the oppression of the natives. Here I talk about Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, that's a little bit more complex, but Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand. Of course, there's the problem of the oppression, if not a downright suppression of the native populations. Of course, that's problematic, and it has been problematic historically. But what white settlers have achieved in these societies, at least within the white societies, it has been the most. That's what I believe. The most. The highest achievement in terms of inner peace. There have been external conflicts. Yeah. Let us talk about the Canadians. Let us forget the Americans. Let us think about the Canadians. No, but more seriously. This has been an ideal where relative stability and peace and peaceful coexistence and rather harmonious coexistence within, of course, a homogeneous population, because the blacks were excluded, the natives were set apart, etc. But that this has been the achievement of an ideal of peaceful human cooperation with the greatest amount of liberty possible and rational debate and the progress of art and science and an enlightenment. Actually, this is the realization of the best of the Enlightenment ideals. Yeah. And I could quote, not quote, I could name, select the England over the past few centuries as well, and the Scandinavian countries. It's also the case of Japan. I mean, there are many societies, but the Scandinavian countries, they have succeeded as well, in a way. But yeah. But it has not been completely satisfactory, because the process has kept going, and a revival of religion in kind of the negative sense, in kind of dogmatic, rigid way with the woke ideology, has taken hold of the minds and hearts of a lot of white people in these societies, precisely because the situation was not as satisfactory as it should have been or could have been or could be, precisely because the proof that people are turning back towards religion, even though consciously they think of themselves as being atheist, they adopt all the codes of religion, namely a rigorous ethic, in-group, out-group, etc., etc., and they are dogmatic really in the negative sense, and they are the hypocritical virtue, the virtue signaling, which is hypocritical, that's the classical religious bigotry. Yeah, so there's still a revival of religion in what I call the negative sense. It doesn't seek to bring about peaceful, harmonious interactions within society, but to bring kind of division, and I don't blame them because there are inherent divisions, but simply, yeah, that's what I could say about ethics. Here, in this sense, because I know what some religious people think. My ideal is really the libertarian ideal, because here I know that it sounds provocative to religious people, but this is what I believe. A state of being which enables an ethical lifestyle. So there would be ethics, there wouldn't be the dissolution of the modern Western world. There would be an ordered and ethical society, namely guided by men living according to principles, but which would render God as a pure abstraction not necessary. Oh, there you are trying to suppress God. No, precisely. God would have been actualized, here that's my Hegelian view, because men would have learned to behave rationally and ethically, and they would no longer need the fear of a moral judge who punishes them for their every sin, because they would have become moral themselves, because they would have grown up and matured and succeeded in living harmoniously together based on principles, and God would no longer be a pure abstraction. He would have been actualized ethically and in law and in the whole of society. And here that's the view of the boring German metaphysician, but actually I agree with what he says on this. God would have been made manifest in ethics, morality and law, and eventually art, religion and philosophy, because the divide between the supernatural and the human will have been abolished, because man, through his virtuous behavior, here I agree with the Muslim text that I've just reading to before, it's not man becoming God by becoming an insane scientist in search for knowledge. Science can help to improve, but because precisely science will have been used to bring about virtue, and if it succeeds, that's the triumph of man, which is actually the triumph of God, because if man is the creation of God, that's the case. If man triumphs, that's the best homage that you can pay to God. And then God maybe would say in his clouds in the sky, say, they have succeeded. That's the proof that I'm a good creator. My creation, they succeed in growing up and ordering and organizing themselves. They become successful. They become moral. I can retire now. And then God retires, and humans, they say, where is God? He has gone away. And then they go in a search for God in another adventure, maybe. Yeah. That's what I had to say. So now I'll go back I will make a short break where I will drink my glass of water. And yeah. Okay, so about the clean your room. So here I will show my virtue signaling, and if you have listened to what I've been talking about for many dozens of minutes, you will notice, you will have understood that the virtue signaling that I preach, I do not expect people to follow rigorously. This is just the lifestyle that I have adopted over the month or the year, sometimes unconsciously, and over the past month and the past year it has been more and more consciously, and it has helped me a lot, psychologically, physically, intellectually, morally. I'm a process, I'm far from being perfect, but it has helped me a lot, and if it can help you as well, whoever you are, that's my contribution. So, yeah. My view is moral, ecological, and economic, namely if you give up most of these temptations, I might say, it will be better economically, ecologically, morally. But I don't expect everyone to give up on everything. If you have a couple of vices, or even three, that's okay, I don't care. If the purpose is not to rigorously, the purpose is to rigorously obey a code of ethics, but not in a rigid way. I mean, if you are a good person, if you smoke cigarettes, or if you watch TV, a stupid TV show, if you are a good person, I don't care. But the purpose is, my view is to get rid of as much useless stuff as possible for myself, and to encourage others to do it as well, for, like I said, ecological, economic, and eventually ethical reason. And what I'm searching for is freedom and liberty. And there can be no liberty without order and discipline. And I have tried to implement a daily life discipline, because that's liberating, actually. To discipline yourself is liberating. Yeah. I'm dialectical enough to know that a very disciplined people would say the exact opposite. The people would say, too much discipline, that's alienating, we need moral loosening. They would call this liberation, and they would become a little bit decadent. I understand dialectics. But after 50 years of moral loosening in the West, a return to more individual discipline can only be good if it's balanced by the necessity to take into account the flaws of human nature. So the purpose is not to become perfect, or to become perfect all at once. It's to perfect oneself. Yeah. And here I will use the French language to illustrate. The purpose is not the search for perfection, but for, in French, it's not perfection, but perfectionnement. That's in English would be not perfection, but perfectioning. Not perfection, but improvement. Yeah. Because if you ask perfection, you will be disappointed. But if you ask for improvement, you can be disappointed as well. But anyone can improve. But it's very difficult to be perfect. But to improve, it can be difficult as well, but it's not impossible. And anyone, whoever he or she is, can do small steps to improve. And here I just share the ideas that I have been practicing. And yeah, that's... And then, I will be honest as well, because I kind of understand the religious mentality. When you start on an individual level to act virtuously, here Nietzsche is the antidote. You have the temptation to judge others and to adopt a position of moral superiority and to become the judge of others, to say, I am more virtuous than you, etc. That's why in the modern world, white leftists do with their anti-racist morality. The more you practice virtue, even if virtue is not really virtuous, but you feel good about yourself, and then you start to become a little bit of a fanatic, and it can be excessive. And I am lucid enough when I'm in a stable mood to know about the danger of moral fanaticism. So yeah, that's why it's okay to not be okay sometimes. Yeah. It's not a justification for vice or for degeneracy or for vice, but it's sometimes it's okay. It's okay to. I'm not justifying vice, but I'm simply explaining that trying to be too virtuous, it's already a problem. And here Nietzsche was kind of clear-minded about the problems of the religious mentality, whether it is consciously or unconsciously religious. Yeah. Because here, I'm well aware that a lot of my ethics is kind of white leftist ecological fanaticism, and I'm intelligent enough to understand that unconsciously I try to just to fit in my social group, intelligent white leftist, and I try to adopt unconsciously, but now I'm aware of this, I've tried to adopt their cause to fit in because I just seek to belong to a group of people. Yeah. So here's about clean your room. So now I will start briefly commenting this because I haven't in the previous video. So about clean your room. Clean and order your room. I advise to list all your possessions, because it will enable you to. Here, that's my experience with accountancy, but that's how I function. I appreciate knowing what I possess materially, to be aware of what I have, where everything is, so that I can access this more easily. I haven't done this yet completely because although I have gotten rid of a lot of material stuff, I'm very meticulous in a way. And I haven't classified all my documents, but basically if you know what you possess, you know where everything is, and while doing this you will get rid of an enormous amount of stuff. It will simplify your life. Yeah, so that's about clean your room. And once your room is ordered and clean, you will waste a whole lot less time, you will be less stressed. I've spent an enormous amount of time for more than a year when I say ordering my library. It has been very strenuous, but the rewards are now that I can easily access all my books. I know where they are, and it enables me and it helps me in my work, and I can be more productive, more efficient. So it's simply common sense that order in your immediate environment, whether it's the household or the workplace, is a requirement. Yeah. Then about minimalism. That's here an advice from preppers. Out with the old. Get rid of all the objects that you do not use. Give them away to charities. Send them to the dustbin if they are really useless. But yeah, simplify. Here I have done this. I do not have a lot of material possession because I'm not genuinely interested in most material objects. You can buy second-hand. I have done this. I have bought furnitures, crockery, clothes second-hand. It enables to make economy, savings. Yeah, and I have given away a lot of stuff to charities, not out of the kindness of my heart, but simply because I needed space in my room. And if it can help people, that's good. And here, it will give you more space. And I encourage you to reject planned obsolescence, namely when you need to buy an object, try to buy, if you can, something which is more expensive, but of higher quality. Because on the longer term, buying one high quality object is better than having to buy 3 times the same kind of objects, but of a lesser quality. So here, investment, so that's economic reasoning. It's better to invest in objects than just buy objects. If you have to buy a daily, or not daily, but goods that you use on a daily or weekly basis, which are quickly renewable, like food, hygiene products, etc., you can buy. But whenever you buy an object which is supposed to last many months or many years, try to buy really high quality, because on the longer term that will be more beneficial, because you will not need to replace the object because of poor quality. So here I have practiced this, not always, because sometimes you just need an object without having the time to think through about the usefulness, etc. But my view is, if you have the financial mean, pay higher price for better quality than lower price but of poorer quality. So here, choose quality even if it costs more. Yeah. Okay, that was a joke. Do not take pets if you don't take care of them. And the same goes with wives and girlfriends. Do not marry a wife or a girlfriend if you don't take care of her. Okay, that's a dubious humor. That's yeah. No, actually, that's serious. Do not buy pets, or do not. Yeah, that's a joke, but do not get engaged with a woman, or do not buy a pet if you do not intend taking care of them. Yeah. Yeah. So. Here are pieces of advice for the kitchen. So here that's a geographical or a spatial determination. I have started buying in bulk, as you call this, or wholesale. Namely, I try to reduce to the minimum the amount of plastic and packaging and wrappings that I buy. And when I can, I buy in bulk. It's more economic, and it's healthier ecologically, less pollution, less plastic. It's less expensive. Yeah, take the time to cook. Here, that's there is less is more, but there is also more is less. If you spend more time, if you dedicate, whether you are a single person, a male or a female, or if you are a couple, if you take time to cook, that's also an investment. You will, instead of just buying processed food and putting this into the microwave, which is, it consumes plastic, it's pollution, it's bad quality food, it's unhealthy, it consumes electricity, etc., etc. It's not, I mean, cooking as well, but it's unhealthy ecologically, economically, physiologically. If you take the time to cook yourself the meals that you eat by transforming and processing the food yourself, on the longer term it will be healthier, the food will be better, you will enjoy doing this, it will relax and relieve a lot of stress. The processed food industry, it has to go away. People, if here, trying to earn the greatest amount of time, it may sound like a good idea, but actually no, because if everyone does this on a collective scale, that's the expansion of processed food and then the diseases which comes with it. People lose their skills. Women and housewives, they don't know how to cook any longer. They are becoming dependent on the supply chains. They spend time doing stupid activities instead of enhancing their skills, etc. So here I have a traditionalist view. Whether you are a male or a female, cooking is good. It's better if it's the woman, the housewife for the husband, but if you are single, yeah. You can plan your meals to know in advance, to plan forward. You can make a list of the meals for the entire week, so that you will not buy useless products, and you will buy what you eat and eat what you buy. It will make you lose less food and produce less waste. Reduce packaging, reduce food waste, and transform your own food. And the consequences will be less electricity and the need of less kitchen tools. You don't need microwave. You don't you will waste less food. Delivery food, if you cook yourself, you don't need to order food to be delivered. These are kind of bullshit jobs. It's modern day slavery in a way. You don't need frozen food, less processed food, etc., etc. I have been practicing this almost consistently for many months. Yeah. About the crockery department, I have used second-hand crockery. I use organic washing up liquid, a reusable sponge. I try to wash the dishes after each meal. I do not let the dishes pile on top of one another. I try not to procrastinate. That's individual discipline. Sometimes I forget or I'm really exhausted, but most of the time I clean the dishes. I wash the dishes after the meal so that it's constantly and consistently clean and ordered. I use no dishwasher, of course. If you do this, you won't need a wife. That's a joke. And it will produce less pollution. I may sound like I'm very misogynistic, but no, not always. These are jokes. Yeah. About clothes and appearance, the same, the anti-planned obsolescence strategy. Try to buy high quality gear. All the clothes that I've bought over the past year, it was really for the purpose of either better, what is the term? More useful. Here an example, I bought pants, they call this a cargo, where you have, I don't know you recall this, but you can store items here. So I bought this because it's more solid than what I had before, and it has a greater storing capacity. So yeah, I bought, of course, PR sweatshirt for the sake of communicating ideas in a simple way. But other than that, I have bought high quality shoes. I've used, I think, 3 pairs of shoes in 4 years. But I am disabled partly, so I don't walk a lot. But I try to buy high quality instead of buying cheap crap several times. Yeah. I've bought second-hand clothes. I've given away a lot of clothes to charities. Try to not let women dress up like prostitutes. Here, I do not blame women, because if males are indifferent, worthless, weak, decadent, etc., they will let their women dress up in a loose way, and the restoration of morality consists not in oppressing women, but simply making men great again, and great men. They will not force necessarily their women to wear clothes to hide their feminine attribute, that they will not tolerate either that they dress like provocative sexual objects. That's not the fault of women, it's indirectly the fault of men who allows this. So strong men will be respected by women, and if women are, if a society has strong men, women will respect them, and then they will respect themselves, and they will stop trying to attract attention by promoting their sexual attributes in the street, etc., etc. So I don't have fashion brands, I have no luxury items. I bought a pair of sunglasses for communication purposes, but other than that I do not wear or use any luxury. I have no jewels, I don't go to the hairdresser, and women can use less makeup. About the laundry, I use organic laundry detergent. I use a wooden washboard that I have illustrated my washing machine at the beginning of the video. I have no tumble dryer, no iron, no washing machine. And I don't need a wife for all the aforementioned reasons. That's a joke. About prepping. Here it's just common sense. You don't have to buy a bunker, but just to have supplies is just common sense. So buying supplies, water, food, medicine, investing in tools and gears, invest in gold or land or Bitcoin, acquire skills. You can invest in training programs, in formation, you can store value, which is the product of your work, in various means other than banks and financial titles. You can to acquire skill, that's investment in the self, that's to invest in your own increase in competence, increase in competence against the increased incompetence of socialized society, excesses of socialized life. So yeah, to be a prepper means simply to be responsible and to have a diverse financial wallet. In a way, you have to store your values in various stores of value: land, gold, skills, tools, etc., etc. So wherever you are, whenever you watch this, buying supplies as frequently as possible for you, for your relatives, your neighbors. If everyone is as self-sufficient as possible, it brings about stability and yeah. And here are the names of some preppers. Garden. I encourage you to grow your own food. You can start a permaculture farm if you have land, or you can even grow a few vegetables depending on the room that you have at your disposal, and buy heirloom seeds, not to be dependent on the big business industry, Monsanto and stuff like that. So yeah, I have done this for many months. I have encouraged a lot of people, either privately or publicly, to do so as well. And here a piece of advertisement is, in case of inflation, if you have stored food that you have bought or that you buy, and if you have food which is stored, when you eat the food many months or sometimes many years later, you will eat food that you have bought at a price before the current inflation, because inflation actually it's a constant process. This is what Ron Paul talks about in End the Fed. There has been a constant inflationary process in the entire Western world because of the currency manipulation and the fiat creation of unsustained and the debasement of currency, basically the creation of money out of thin air, reduces the value of the money in circulation, dollars, euros, and everywhere there is a central bank which creates money out of thin air for political purposes and scheming and crony capitalism, as they call this. So the inflationary process is constant, and one way of mitigating the effect is simply to buy food in order to consume many months and sometimes many years later, food which will not have been too inflated. The price will not have been too inflated. Yeah, and it's simply for personal responsibility. Yeah. About waste. the 3R: recycle, reuse, reduce, use less plastic and wrappings, weigh the garbage. I haven't done this yet, but in order to reduce and to keep track of the use of a bokashi. I've talked about this in my previous video. That's a Japanese device for recycling vegetables. I don't use newspapers. They pollute the mind, of course, but the planet as well. I pick up the trash when I walk outside. I've done this almost consistently for now, I would say, maybe 6 months, with, I would say, a 95% consistency rate. For 95% of days, broadly, I've picked up the trash for at least 10 minutes, sometimes 20 or 30 minutes. When I walk outside, it's just a civic action, and and then you have to be able to explain why Western streets are filled with garbage and trash, and here are some of the reasons. Socialism, because if it's public property, people don't care. They have no incentive to care about a property which does not belong to them, although indirectly it does, not for the good aspect, but it does in the sense that it is financed by their taxes. The destruction of the patriarchy. A lot of people, young people, they lack an education from a patriarchal moral education. This has been my case, so I don't blame them, but you have to improve when you grow up. The welfare state, because it reduces the ties of reciprocal moral obligation within communities, because if you behave like a civic, I wouldn't say a civic degenerate, but if you behave like a problematic member of society, there is no punishment from the moral community, because the moral community has been annihilated by the welfare state and has been replaced by a bureaucratic intervention. So if you throw up your trash in the street, your cigarette butts, your trash can, etc., your cans in the street, there is no moral condemnation, because the communities have been disconnected and destroyed in a way by the welfare state. Forced integration, when group of ethnically different people are forced to live together on the same territory without consent, namely when it is imposed by the state, it creates tension between the various ethnic groups. It's true in the US between blacks, Hispanics, Asians, whites, etc., etc. It's true in Western Europe between Muslims, sometimes African, whether they are Christian or Muslim, Asian, the native population, etc. Between various European ethnic groups, there are Albanians, or between the various communities. When it is imposed by the state, it creates tension, and finally, because there have been dysgenic processes in the Western world over the past couple of centuries, and since the implementation of the welfare state over the past 70 years. So these are some of the reasons why there is so much trash in the streets, which I know empirically is shocking to Eastern Europeans who go in Western Europe, but to Asians, to Asians, usually Japanese or Chinese tourists, that's shocking, the amount of trash which is found in the streets of countries like England, France, maybe less in Germany, because the Germans, maybe they are less decadent on this aspect, but it's shocking for Asians, but it's even shocking for Eastern Europeans, because here the Marxist analysis is that the poverty of Eastern Europe under decades of communism has preserved more or less communities because they were in difficult economic conditions, so they had to help one another, and therefore they have kept some standards of civic behavior which have been completely destroyed in the West because of an excess of wealth and an excess of welfare redistribution. And this is the reason why, these are some of the reasons why there is so much civic degeneracy in Western countries. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah. I have talked about the second layer, minimalism, furnitures, prepping, clothes and laundry, kitchen, crockery and the garden. And now I will promote some books. But first I will illustrate. I have bought this, I don't know how you call this, these plastic cans or bins to buy in bulk, as you call this. So I no longer, when I can avoid, I no longer buy, here that's wheat, I no longer buy wheat or rice or beans or these kind of products. In individually packaged individual packages. I go to the seller, to the retailers, the person who sells the product, if they sell in bulk, and I go with my empty container and I ask them to fill the container. It's more ecological, it's more economic, because you do not pay the plastic, you do not pay the advertisement on the plastic, you do not pay the marketing, the guy of the marketing, their salaries indirectly, it's contained within the product. If you buy just the raw product without the packaging, the wrappings, less pollution, it's less expensive. Yeah, and also that's an example. I bought this second hand and I produce my own fruit juice, so that's a piece of plastic. So I do not buy usually fruit, I do not buy fruit juice in plastic or wrappings. I buy oranges or pineapples and I produce the juice myself. It's ecological, it's much better, it tastes better, there are more vitamins, it's healthier, it's much more satisfying. So I produce my juice myself. That's just an illustration that things that you can do yourself, and if everyone spend more time to produce things themselves, simple things, collectively, there are a lot of bullshit jobs which would vanish. Of course, the economy as accumulation of growth would dramatically decline, and people say we do not have the time to go to the individual retailer or to produce our own food or to cook our own food. Yes, but a whole perspective, a holistic perspective on society, people do not have time because they have to work jobs, but a lot of jobs are bullshit jobs, and there is a lot of useless stuff and a lot of waste. Here, I will go pick up Per Byland again. Here, that's the where is Per Byland? There comes a moment when it will be like Hegel. I will no longer need the book because I've read so much. I will have read so much of Per Byland that I will be able to speak. I mean, not as with as much competence as Mr. Per Byland individually, because he's more competent, etc. And he's much more good looking than I could ever be. But yeah, here's Per Byland. It's commonly thought that libertarians, they are capitalists, which they are, and they just care about the money. No, that's not true. Wealth is a consequence of sound economic policies, which is free market, which is connected with political freedom, so it's a consequence. But in a free market, if you want to buy ecological, organic products and live a simple lifestyle and do things yourself, if you have the financial means, you can. Free market doesn't mean to accumulate it doesn't mean working jobs you hate to buy shit you don't need. It means the freedom to choose. And in a free market, there is economic opportunity, which means if your job is bullshit, you have the freedom to quit your job and to find another job. The abstract freedom, at least it's not always possible if you are not intelligent enough or competent enough, or if you have a family to take care of, you cannot morally or physically or intellectually, but you have at least the abstract freedom, because here that's the trick of the political Marxists. They say, oh, the freedom that the free market offers is just abstract freedom, but abstract freedom is better than no freedom at all, because in the political Marxist regimes, it has been proven that not only there were no concrete freedom, namely you could not choose the job that you wanted to, either because you were also limited by intellect, competence, skills, etc., and the economic condition, but you did not even have the abstract freedom to do so. So, yeah. The historical Marxists, they identified the flaws or the deficiencies in more or less functioning capitalist society, so it has to be credit given to them, but they refuse to acknowledge a lot of the good points. Marx, he used to do this, but the subsequent Marxists, they forget to praise the good aspect of capitalism, and the solution that they offer, it has mostly negative effects. So, yeah, this book, yeah, is a source of inspiration. So yeah, these are examples, and now another example. I have bought this that I haven't even yet used to cook. That's vapor cooking. I don't know how you call this. It's not cooked in water. It's boiling water. Actually, that's vapor that cooks mostly the vegetables. I am not a materialist in a sense of acquisition of objects, and I'm kind of reluctant to buy not technological objects, because when it comes to computers and cameras and stuff, I'm in favor, of course, obviously, of technology. But here, spontaneously, I'm not tempted to buy electric tools for the kitchen and for the food. But here, the reason is, if you invest in this, it will enable you to cook healthier food, and that's an investment, because if you eat healthy food which is cooked in a healthy way, you will have less health problems, you will be in a better health, you will be more balanced, more productive, you will economize a lot of money, because if you just buy raw, organic, locally produced vegetables and you cook them yourself, more ecology, less pollution, less transportation, more savings, better health. So that's an illustration of, here it's kind of dumb, but actually no, that's a Hegelian perspective, namely to use nature against itself, namely, because here I have in mind the views of the radical religious people, to negate the natural world, the physical world. It's kind of good, but if it's done abstractly, it's not good, namely to detach yourself from the material world. It does not necessarily mean to become to practice asceticism the way in the Western imagination that Indian people do, namely to be completely detached from the world. The Buddhist monks, in maybe sometimes an caricature way, caricature view, namely the Buddhist monk who doesn't care about anything, the Chinese wise person, the wise philosopher, etc. Because it cannot be universalized on a social scale. It's for specific individuals. In Western tradition, these are the monks and the clerks and the clergy the monks, not the priests, but the monks of the Middle Ages who lived in how do you call it, monasteries, really to have a completely ascetic life. It can be good, and I have nothing against those who might wish to practice this kind of life, but it cannot be completely adopted for the whole of society. Namely, there has to be a minimum of economic productivity. And here, that's an example of a good negation of one might say, that's the use of technology for the purpose of ecology. And in this sense, I'm not opposed at all to innovation and to use material objects to reduce the dependency on the material world. Because if you cook healthy food, you will be, in a way, more independent, because you will be healthier, more vitality, your brain activity will be more balanced, you will be more healthy, and then the consequence is more people are healthy, less needs for socialized medicine, less needs for infrastructures to cure people, less need for medicine, drugs, medical drugs to cure problems which will have disappeared. So in this sense, sometimes investing in material objects, if it enables you to become less dependent on many other material needs or dependencies, that's really good. And in this sense, I have no problem. I'm trying to practice asceticism, but not in a rigid way, in a rigorous way, but not in a rigid way, and in a minimalist way, not in a nihilistic way, in a way. Yeah. It has to be aufgehoben, not completely negated. Low tech, I will talk about it. Low tech, the degrowth, the intelligent proponents of the degrowth movement, this is the Aufhebung of modernity, namely you negate the excesses of modernity and you preserve the good aspects. That's Aufhebung, but that's not abstract negation, namely to completely reject modernity and to go back live in caves. Of course, that's a caricature, but intelligent negation, that's Aufhebung, that's a German philosophy. They are not dumb, these Germans, not always, and when they are smart, they can be very intelligent, very brilliant. Yeah, so really that's Aufhebung, to invest in the material world in order to reduce your dependency on the material world. Yeah. At some moment, when people hear about me, when they hear the full story, they will say, well, he's not as stupid as he might seem sometimes. Yeah. So, here I will promote books which are connected to what I've just talked about, and then I will end the video because it's been more than 2 hours. So probably I will make at least 3 or 4 or maybe 5 parts in this series of videos. basically, Aufhebung, it can be envisioned as an attempt, or not necessarily an attempt, but a way of always drawing in a simple language. Aufhebung means to draw inspiration to all your experiences in a way, even the negative ones, to extract the positive out of the negative, I might say. Yeah. And that's in traditional wisdom, the way it is formulated is you can learn from every experience, even difficult, unpleasant experiences. They will toughen you up, it will strengthen your resolve, or it will make you more resilient, etc. etc. Yeah. That's why it's important to be open-minded, because if you open yourself to ideas that you don't think spontaneously that you might be in agreement with, if you explore different perspectives, different ideas, it can strengthen and broaden your horizon, one might say, and yeah, that's why I will not do this in the video, but I will promote books, a certain types of books that I kind of disagree with, but out of honesty, if I have the opportunity, I will promote them nonetheless, because yeah, but yeah. Okay, so now I will just take a short break, because I'm a little bit exhausted physically. Oh. Well, clean your room. I will promote Mr. Peterson. I could have shared all my books about psychology, but I will not do this in this video. So here's the book by Mr. Peterson about clean your. I mean, it's not the book about clean your room, but that's the most iconic book of Mr. Peterson as of now. Okay, books about self-sufficiency. I will try to become as self-sufficient as possible, but my immediate plan is not to start a permaculture farm, because I have ideas to share, video to produce, and as of now I will keep working in my small setting, in my small apartment, but I encourage people to become as self-sufficient as possible. And here, these are books which really promote self-sufficiency in a kind of either off-the-grid living or a rural settings. Basically, I will be honest, this is the kind of lifestyle that I would like to live. Simply to have a simple life with a mixture of individual manual labor, but also intellectual work, namely the ability just to peacefully sit and read good books, which I haven't done actually, because I've always been working, and whenever I read, it's under a state of more or less constant pressure, because I see that there are problems pretty much everywhere. But I try to find a balance between sharing my knowledge and gathering knowledge. I try to find a proper balance. But this book, the Transition Handbook, of course, it's an excellent idea. How to live without money, how to depend less on the system, and the road towards food self-sufficiency. Of course, not everyone can do this here. It's really a good idea, but it's a particular idea, namely, a modern society cannot set as a goal or as an ideal individual self-sufficiency for all its members, because that would be going back to Middle Age economy. It's good that as many people be as autonomous as possible, but to be completely self-sufficient, here, that's the view of the libertarians. The division of labor, the division of labor is that which enables social cooperation, economic progress, and eventually intellectual and artistic and scientific progress. And I understand dialectically why modern Western civilization produces these kind of books, because it answers a need, a deeply rooted need of the soul, maybe for having a peaceful, stable, simple life. But it cannot be the ideal of an entire society, nor of an entire civilization. There has to be a balance between interdependence and personal autonomy and personal self-sufficiency. If everything is too interdependent, it becomes dependence, and it's negative. But if everyone becomes self-sufficient, that's not good either, because that's autarky, and that brings about poverty or really in a negative sense. So the ideal of a society would be interdependence, namely where people cooperate with one another, but it requires trust, and it's complicated. In a society where language is being falsified in the news, the sciences are being falsified in academia, the money and the money is being falsified by the central banks, the prices are being falsified by government regulation, society is being disrupted by forced integration of mass of population which cannot be assimilated because of the context and the excess of number. There are problems everywhere. So, yeah. Okay, books about degrowth. They come from right-wing and left-wing perspective. The end of growth. The challenge of non-power, one might say. The Ecology of Jacques Ellul and Bernard Charbonneau. Jacques Ellul is a Jewish, Franco-Jewish person who wrote books about technology. from a Protestant perspective. Pentti Linkola, Can Life Prevail? He's a right-wing ecologist. Theodore Kaczynski, Industrial Society and Its Future. This book is one of the best, contains one of the best depiction of white leftists. It's really excellent. Mr. Kaczynski is really a profound psychologist. He understood aspects of the white psyche in a very lucid, very intelligent way. And yeah. Here that's a very intelligent book from French situationist. That's really the best of the radical far left. Usually far leftists, they are kind of stupid, but here I have to be honest, there are really radical far left people who are genuinely intelligent. They are not numerous, but the situationists, the best of them, they are genuinely lucid and intelligent about genetically modified agriculture. My name is Shellis and I'm in recovery from Western civilization, so here that's kind of a leftist perspective. A book again by radical left wing about the criticism of modern civilization, the technological, political, economic aspect of modern civilization. And here an intelligent, he's an ecologist, but he's kind of intelligent, so he's open to discussing with right-wing and even sometimes far-right circles the reason, it's about planned obsolescence. Yeah. Here it's about degrowth. So here the books that I've just promoted, these were about the criticism of modern technological society, and here it's about degrowth. They are kind of connected. Enough is enough. Building a sustainable economy in a world of finite resources. Low tech. Rethink our technologies for a sustainable world. To slow down or to go down. I think that would be a good translation, to slow down or to go down. The economy of degrowth. Escaping from consumers' society. The grace of enough. So here it was about degrowth. Here it's about minimalism. But minimalism is the individual aspect of degrowth in a way. That's degrowth individualism in a way. Because here I understand the Marxist, the classical Orthodox Marxist, not the cultural Marxist, they would say that's a strategy of a big capital to prevent the poor from raising a class consciousness because the rich member of the bourgeoisie, they adopt an impoverishing lifestyle so they can manipulate the working class by pretending that poverty is good. That's a return to religious puritanism, etc., etc. It's partly true, and here I will make a joke. Actually, it's not a joke, but it's kind of funny for people with a good sense of humor in a way. Here I talk about the West. Over the past 50 years, in the US, in Western Europe, all sorts of economic and political nonsense have been promoted and enacted and implemented with the promise of wealth. If you sell, that's not how it was formulated, but basically sending technology to China or transferring production, industrial production to Asian countries, it will bring about wealth. That's what was told more or less by the left and the right in England, the US and Western Europe, namely the deindustrialization. It has impacted England no, not Wall Street, the city of London, basically England has been deindustrialized and has focused on finance, which has left a great impact upon the working class. It has impacted the US as well. That's Trump, who wants to bring back jobs from Mexico or from China. And it has impacted France for inherent structural reasons, because the euro currency, but also because of economic socialism. It has impacted Italy and most countries from Southern Europe. And here, from the perspective of continental Europe, the European economists, left-leaning, they complain about Germany, because Germany is one of the very few countries which has not been completely deindustrialized, because they are more competent, because the currency the euro currency favors the German industry, etc., and it is detrimental to lower economies like the economies of Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, and France for some aspects. So they complain about the Germans. Every time something goes wrong in Europe, the inferior nations of Europe, they complain about the Germans, and then the Germans, they get a little bit pissed off, and yeah. But I am wise enough to to avoid the mistakes of the past. But yeah, that's really how it happened. People, Europeans of Europe, when they complain economically, they blame the Germans, because the Germans, they are more successful economically. Yeah, so here, a book translated from America into French. Love people, use things, because the reverse does not function. The original title, love people, use things. Yeah. So about the degrowth minimalist movement. Here I cannot agree with the Orthodox economic Marxist, who understand that it's a trick used by what they call the dominant class to justify poverty for the working class. So yeah, for the past many decades, the dominant class in most Western countries has been working to bring about the economic destruction of the West by sending the technology and the productive capacities to mostly Asia, China, or Mexico in the case of the but to destroy the economic infrastructure, to leave Western countries completely naked economically, and to leave them completely dependent, while making an enormous amount of money by selling industries how do you call this? Transferring to lower the cost. How do you call this? It's not exportation. It's the delocalization. Yeah, yeah. So, but the Western elites have been working for the past many decades to destroy their own economy and to strengthen Asian economies, mostly, or Southern American, or mostly Asian economies, while promising that it would bring wealth, because to focus not on the industry but on the services, the new economy, the economy of knowledge, finance, the perspective of the fourth industrial revolution. So they have sold this bullshit to the people, and while promising or mass immigration. How many times the politicians have said, we need migrants, they will bring prosperity because immigrants, they work harder, they do the jobs that the native population refuses to do. Let us bring migrants, they will strengthen the economy, etc. They have been repeating this for decades and decades, and now, for inherent structural reasons, because of the failure of the banking system, the dumping down of the population through the educational system, the degradation of the overall quality of the population at large, the moral decline, the decline of everything, the economy is faltering and declining, and now there is really more and more poverty because of inflation, because the failure of the educational system, because the shipping away of jobs and productive capacities, etc. So really, the economic conditions are becoming more and more difficult, and now the same people, I mean, not literally the same, but the members of the dominant class, and here that's where I agree with the classical Marxists, they change the ideology and they say, oh, poverty is virtuous, wealth is synonymous with pollution, we have to promote degrowth and a reduction of standards of living for the sake of the planet, etc. I find this funny on a personal level because I don't really care about high standards of living as such if the minimum, which is already very high, but I don't really care about materialism in a sense of accumulating objects. So on a personal level, I don't really care, but I understand the frustration because if you promise economic wealth for decades and now there is more and more poverty and you change the ideology, the common speech to say, oh, but actually that's good. If you care about material prosperity, you are a little bit frustrated. I don't, because washing my clothes with a wood washboard and reducing my standards of living, I don't really care as such because that's my personal view. What I care about is the ability to read good books peacefully, mostly, but I see the tragicomical aspect, namely when there is a complete political and economic structural failure. The people, they just change the message, and yeah. So here the classical Marxists who say that the dominant ideology is the ideology of the dominant class. I simplify; it's much more complex, but this is what Marx said in the German Ideology, I think, the book. He's kind of right, and here's yeah. So here I explain because it's kind of intelligent. These people, the ecologists, here that's about minimalism and degrowth. The ecologists who promote degrowth and minimalism in their books, they are well-intentioned, most of them they are genuine and they genuinely care about the planet, so in a sense this is good, but where the Marxists are correct is that these honest people who genuinely care, because usually these are very intelligent white leftists and they genuinely care about the planet, and I agree, and about the people and the future generation, and I agree with most of their views, but what is kind of comical is that the dominant elites who do not care about ecology, they just care about money and power, yeah, they use the honest, genuine ecologists to promote their ideas, not because they care about ecology, but because they want to manipulate the masses. So that's here a very complex cunning of reason, where ecological ideas, which are good, because really degrowth really is good when it's sustainable and when it's measured. You know, degrowth after the excesses of wealth, which has brought about all the diseases that I have listed and showed in the books at the beginning of the video, it's kind of really good morally and from a healthy point of view and from an ecological point of view. It's simply good because really there are excesses of wealth in a way. So it's really good, but they promote the good for bad reasons because they just want to appease the masses who complain about the destruction of their jobs and the destruction of society, etc. So that's the comical aspect. They just want to secure their power, and by doing so they promote genuinely good intentioned people, so they promote the good with bad intentions. I will put the link of a song by Rihanna, S and M. It feels so good to be bad. Because I may be bad, but I'm perfectly good at it. Yeah. Plastic ocean, the limits to growth, the age of limits, survive development. So all these people, usually they are intelligent, not all of them, but most of them, they are intelligent, mostly white, ecologists, who are genuine in their care about the planet. They genuinely care about ecology. And they are intelligent. And I have a short book by Kaczynski, Linkola, or Savitri Devi, and others. They are really right-wing, radical right-wing people who genuinely agree with radical ecologists who are usually classified on the left, and they might have disagreement on many other aspects, but on the fundamental determination about sustainability, ecology, they are in agreement with one another. That's the unity of opposed determinations. That's a Hegelian concrete unity, a Hegelian synthesis, one might say. Yeah. About prepping, I've already promoted these books. I will continue to do so. The Prepper's Water Survival Guide, How to Build Autonomy. So here that's a radical left-wing group, which actually promotes the kind of ideas which are promoted by right-wing radical groups. Namely, they are survivalist, but unconsciously, or simply they do not talk about the tension and the conflicts between ethnic or religious groups, but actually by trying to escape from the system, they arrive at the same view than radical ecologists and radical right-wingers and preppers, etc., etc. Countdown to Preparedness, the Preppers 52-week course to total disaster readiness. I've been distributing this book, the guide to food supply, probably dozens of copies, and I will continue to do so. Simply, it's responsible to have supplies. Survive the Economic Collapse by Piero San Giorgio. The Prepper's Survival, the Prepper Survival Retreats, Off-Grid Living, Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide, Pantry Primer by Daisy Luther, and books for children about prepping. Prepper Pete Prepares, Survivalist Sam Stocks Up. So basically, whether it's for ecology, political left-wing autonomy, ethnic preservation from a right-wing perspective, ecologists, right-wingers, left-wingers, when they are kind of radical, they agree with one another. They just want less dependence on a system which has become too pervasive and too oppressive in a way. Not only politically, that's usually the view of the right, but economically, not in terms of creation of poverty. That's the view of some radical leftist group, not because the system creates poverty. It partly does in certain categories, but because the system creates oppression. But the view of the right is, of course, political oppression. That's what the libertarian denounce with a clear-minded view. But the view of some radical left-wing group is the system, the technological, economic structure creates oppression because it creates dependence. And in this sense, there are radical left-wing libertarians, but simply their view is some sort of communist anarchy, whereas right-wing anarchy is based on private property, and the right-wingers, they are more clear-minded, but both actually, they kind of agree on a lot of points. I already promoted these books, How to Reduce, Recycle. Yeah. I have distributed these kind of books over and over again, and I will continue to do so as long as I can, as long as I have to encourage people to change their behavior and to waste less resources. And finally, or not finally, but here are some books about cooking or preserving food. So here we have the Bible to preserving food. Yeah. Do-it-yourself books about how to do everything more or less yourself. So here that's the same. These kind of books, they appear, usually they are written by middle class people who do not suffer from poverty. It's an ideological minimalism. Yeah, so yeah, the way to reformulate what I've been doing, the do-it-yourself is usually an ideology promoted by middle-class people who do not suffer, here that's budget management, who do not suffer necessarily from economic poverty. They do it for, in a way, for a spiritual purpose. It can also be partly economic, but they do it simply because they want to become more independent and to become more autonomous and to have a fulfilling lifestyle in terms of being able to create themselves their own life without being dependent on schedules, a hierarchy, the stress, living in crowded cities, etc. So they do this usually if they are middle class because they have the financial means to do so. They willingly reduce their standards of living because they do not care about the material aspect of existence as such. But the system, as they call it, namely the politicians, the scholars, the journalists, the media, etc., they promote these middle class, usually left-leaning people, they promote their ideology to justify towards the working class the degradation of their working conditions. And then, here I understand the trick, the privileged, usually white leftists, they can moralize the white working class and accuse them of being materialist, decadent, plunged into sensual pleasures, etc., because they themselves, because they moralize. I might be partly responsible of doing this. I'm aware of my flaws. Not all of them, but some. I am partly guilty. This T-shirt is, yeah. So I understand myself. Yeah, but yeah, these arrogant white leftists, privileged white leftists, they moralize the white working class by accusing them. So that's a modern feature. Really, it is developing over the past few years or maybe a couple of decades maximum because they understand that the economic conditions have been destroyed by their own policies, their own socialist policies and their own cooperation with China, with Asia, etc. So they have destroyed, consciously or unconsciously, the economic structure, the capital structure of their own society. And the consequence is mass poverty, not in absolute terms, because even here I have to agree with common sense. To be poor in a Western country, whether you are white or non-white, to be poor in a Western country in the modern world, you are still way more rich and wealthy than most people in the world. But poverty precisely is not an absolute standard. It is relative because it's partly psychological and it partly depends on the economic structure. Namely, a lot of people, they are wealthy from an objective standpoint in comparison with most other inhabitants on this planet and most other people in the history of mankind, but they feel poor and they even are considered to be poor because it is compared with those who are wealthier within the same set of circumstances, namely within the same society, and it causes psychological suffering if you are poor within your community. Even if your community is very rich, if you are among the poor, you might suffer psychologically because you are lower in economic status. So yeah, but these arrogant white leftists, they use the poverty, they use the good intention of the ideological, honest, white ecologist leftists. They use their ideology, minimalism, degrowth, ecology, sustainability, etc., to justify the poverty of the white working class, which has been caused by the nonsensical, predominantly socialist economic policies which have been implemented for many decades. So, and then they can use moralism, really in a negative sense, in a religious, bigoted way. Oh, you are decadent, etc. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So here, I will be honest, I don't agree with a lot of Marxist views on economics or the world at large, but here, that's a good aspect about my French my French side. What might say is that because culturally I'm partly French, and the French, they are really a Marxist country, so I have the Marxist lens, because everyone unconsciously is a Marxist in a country like France. So I have the Marxist view that the Anglo-Saxons cannot have. So I understand there's a lot of nonsense in a lot of Marxist analysis. I'm not talking about the analysis of Karl Marx, I'm talking about the analysis of Marxist thinkers. They have misinterpreted Marx a lot. So there is a lot of nonsense, of course, but there's also an aspect of truth, if we simplify, namely the economic conditions of the people. It can shed a lot of light. And this kind of analysis, the French, they are very good at providing these kind of analysis. That's one of the very few things that French intellectuals are good at, because almost everyone in France, every intellectual is a Marxist intellectual, even on the right wing. Marxist, not consciously, but they use the categories of Marxism. So there is a lot of intellectual decadence and nonsense, but some of them, because if they are all specialized in this, some of them have to be competent, more or less. They can provide enlightening views, and that's what I've tried to share with these views, namely, really the privileged member of the elite. They use really the good intentions of ecological white leftists to justify the impoverishment that the policies implemented by the elites have caused on the working class. Yeah. And here about the climate. The reason why these kind of books are being promoted is precisely for what I've said, for two reasons. First, to justify the impoverishment caused by 70 years or at least 50 years of economic and social and political and ethnic and demographic destructionism. So they have to focus the attention on a new narrative. Don't look at all the problems, think about the climate in 500 years. That's one of the reasons. And the other reason is that the threat of climate catastrophe, it justifies the implementation of bureaucratic regulations. I can anticipate. Yeah, I will do a little bit, I don't know. There's this scene in Matrix, the Matrix, the movie, the second movie. I can handle them. Handle us. You handle us. You and your predecessor had much more respect. And then they shoot the bullets, and I have my neo skills. I can anticipate your ecological socialist nonsense. I stop the bullets, and then, okay, you've got some skill. Kill him. And then I have to use my neo skills. Yeah. Well. Well. It's been almost 3 hours. I will just conclude with a remark. Basically, I intellectually, I intend to make videos for the whole of home economics. Here, that's the second. I don't know when it will be published. I will put the link to the first, and maybe to the others, depending on when I publish what et al. But I intend to complete the presentation of the whole structure. Yeah, but here a remark about my intellectual development, one might say. I can be quite dumb, and there are so many information. I have accumulated so many information that it's very difficult to fathom and to gather and to understand everything. But I travel in spite of my stupidity in a way. Sometimes I nonetheless travel at the speed of light or even faster. And there are just so many information that I have accumulated in my process, in my journey as an individual, but also information coming from everywhere that really I am struggling. Not in a sense of it's hard, although it is, but struggling in a sense that I am focusing and dedicating my effort to bring order in my mind and in my immediate environment. And here, of course, I will try, or I have tried, not to justify myself, but to explain at least, to maybe to defend myself. The entirety of world knowledge is available, but it's not that it's just available, that it's within my mind in a way, and I try to slow down my process in a way on an individual level, because there are just too many information in a way that's exciting, and I am fascinated by a lot of by almost every topic of inquiry. But it goes so fast. That's why I have had the tendency to be excessive in terms of rigor, to the point of rigidity with my very complex system, because I need to. And here, I'm here in a calm and stable mood in a way. But my problem is, I have a lot of problems, but I call this socialism. Namely, it's collectivized regulation which bring forth incompetence, because this is what I suffer from. I suffer from being incompetent on an individual level and having to learn everything to try to become competent with a lot of responsibility, and I have to relearn everything, to rediscover everything, and not only intellectually but then to apply, to behave ethically, to try to solve all the problems. And I have been, and I am completely unprepared, because the very structure of a socialist society produces incompetence. So I am partly resentful, but I have to learn to accept, because I understand the need for the psychological need, the reason why people need regulations, not, I'm not here talking about ethical or moral or religious regulations, I'm talking about bureaucratic or political regulation. I understand why people need this, and why they trust corrupt politicians in a way, precisely because they need stability. And here, I've been reading this. I understand why a lot of people complain about capitalism in spite of the tremendous results in terms of higher life expectancy, the demographic expansion, standards of living, access to education, healthcare, etc., which have been redistributed by socialist policy, so they take the credit, but actually in the first place it was created by capitalist entrepreneurs, which have brought forth a new method of production, which has enabled the development of the productive forces of the workers. Yeah, but these are the entrepreneurs. So here I agree, theoretically, I agree with the Austrians of the Austrian school, and this book summarizes very intelligently the view. But I understand also, while reading this book, why a lot of people have a problem with capitalism in spite of the tremendous achievements over the past 2 centuries of the capitalist mode of production, which has multiplied. There are other factors, but basically the human population has been multiplied 8-fold, by a factor of 8. Broadly, life expectancy has been multiplied by 2 or 3 in some parts of the world. So it has brought about tremendous human progress that, except really radical left-wing or right-wing groups of radical here, kind of in a negative sense, would consider negative. The explosion of demography, in a good sense, that a multiplication of human life in better conditions and standards of living than previously known anywhere at any time. So in this sense, capitalism has brought about tremendous successes, but I understand why people complain, not because of the flaws of capitalism, but why they complain in spite of the tremendous successes, because from a psychological standpoint they need stability, and the production process consists in disrupting everything all the time to bring about innovation and economy of scales and better productivity, etc. And I can understand why, from a simply psychological standpoint, people might reject, and actually they reject capitalism, because even in the capitalist society, it is actually socialized society. I understand the psychological reason, simply because people, they need balance and stability. It goes too fast in a way. Capitalism, it is too good, it goes too fast, it's too productive, it's too efficient, it's too great in a way, and it turns into its opposite, yes or no, but it brings about negative consequences, not because of its excess of success in a way. And my mind, although I'm kind of dumb sometimes, it works in the same way. When things go too fast, you just need stability, and that's why my autistic aspect, but actually it's partly, it's not just autistic people, but it's more prevalent, more intense for autistic people. I need a rigorous routine of sometimes doing really dumb stuff. Yeah, it's not dumb, but that's just kind of an illustration. I haven't done this consistently, willingly wasting time washing my clothes, but sometimes just to pick up cigarette butts in the street, sometimes just for the sake of slowing down mental activity and willingly wasting time, which is actually, it enables me to be more balanced, more stable, etc., etc. Because otherwise it goes too fast. And in this sense, I know, I'm in a stable mood. I know that I have to, I would say, to forgive or to tolerate the socialist inclinations of people, which have brought about disastrous consequences in terms of promotion of incompetence, economic destructionism, moral decadence, etc. But I have to accept, in a way, and to understand why people, although they keep getting hurt by the socialist policies that they vote for, everywhere on the planet over the 20th century and still to this day, because they need stability. At some, a lot of people, especially if they have lower level of intelligence, it's not derogatory, but they don't really care about complex, not complex philosophical question, but even complex economic question. They don't really care. They just want stability. And any demagogue who comes up and say, "Oh, vote for me, or I will give you free stuff," they trust the person and the political party or the ideology, even though it has consistently failed over the decades in terms of corruption, inefficiency, etc., because they just need stability. And it is an aspect of the human psyche, and to pretend that it does not exist, it can be enlightening in the sense that a radical, here I'm talking about Austrian economics and radical right-wing libertarianism, it's a breath of fresh air for someone who has grown up in a socialist country, because it's completely new, but it's coherent, and it's morally defensible, and it's logically coherent and consistent. In this sense, it's really good, but I understand why it does not appeal to a lot of people, because the sun is too brilliant in a way. In the realm of economics, the right-wing libertarians, they are really brilliant, but they are, in a way, they are too brilliant. And a lot of people, they too much light, they don't enjoy this. They prefer the darkness of socialism, because the Nietzsche knew this. It's the cooling shades of the tree to protect from the excess of light and heat of the sun. Yeah, but that's why when I'm in stable mood, and when I read really wise and intelligent people, religious people, here I'm thinking about the religious text that I've read earlier this afternoon, of course it brings about kind of humility, because when you gather knowledge, when you are intelligent, especially if you have been worthless, and if you have a means to climb up in terms of social status, you may have a tendency, I would say, to be arrogant, or to be too confident, which is not my case. I can be arrogant, but too confident, well, maybe as well, but I understand, because yeah, but what I want to say is, yeah, humility in a good sense consists in accepting the flaws of the others, because from their perspective, life can be difficult as well for other reasons. So yeah, but to know this abstractly, that's the first step. But here I speak here as an individual. I know this abstractly. That's my Spinozian perspective. That people they act the way they do because they are determined in a way. But how should I explain this? I have my own, on a singular level, of course, my own negative impulses that I try to master and to control and to restrict and to limit. But yeah. Taylor Swift wrote a song, "He burns too bright, trouble, trouble," etc., etc. Yeah. So I will stop the video here. I will continue my daily routine for as long as I can, and I intend to keep promoting my document about household economics, and I still have projects to produce many videos, and I will not publish this video in the coming days, because I first intend to complete my videos about home economics, but then I will publish my videos, and the purpose really here, my singular case, is simply to try to solve, of course, global problems, but to solve also singular problems by really, I need routine and order and discipline on a singular level, and it has helped me a lot. Maybe it's not enough, maybe it's maybe it's too much, I don't know, I think maybe it's not enough, but I will keep struggling and working for my own liberty. Yeah, it's an exhausting task, it's challenging, but most of the things that I've promoted and that I will continue to promote in the realm of home economics, they have helped me a lot psychologically in terms of growth. It has really helped me a lot. And I share my documents. People, they can draw inspiration, correct, improve, contradict. But yeah, I'm a singular individual. And when I express ideas which are good and true, they belong to everyone.